Odyssey, written by the one and only said Homer. That's literally his name. It's kind of funny. Anyways, this book takes place around 2,000 years ago. Around the time of the War of Rome and Greece, with the Trojan Horse incident, which this book definitely goes deliberately into. Around that event, and the very polytheistic society of the Greeks. Society at the time was very polytheistic, and so a lot of the events in the book really do make sense, and possibly could be believable to someone like a Greek person. A Greek person from then, and their beliefs of Zeus, Hades, Poseidon, the whole 9 yards of their polytheistic society. Anyways, now on to the book. This book has a lot of nice themes of temptation, pride, and loyalty. So that also really ties into the author's purpose here, as it sends a nice message. A lot of themes of pride, such as when Odysseus goes to the Cyclops as he stabbed out its eye. Cyclops, if any mortal man asks you who it was who inflicted your eye on the shameful blinding, tell him that you were blinded by Odysseus, sacker of cities. This was from 560 of Book 9. Odysseus is shown to have a lot of pride, and also previously before this, one of the reasons why he's been so far out at sea is because of this pride. Because also the incident regarding Troy, as previously stated, involved the Trojan horse. He was responsible for the Trojan horse. Apparently, that's what it says in this book, that he was the one who constructed it and came up with it. It would have not worked if Poseidon was not there to help, because apparently Poseidon helped distract the people so that they could get in. That's also an example, and also further down the line with the sirens, he thinks he can get away with just tying himself to a rope and listen to the sweet songs of the sirens. Boy, was he wrong, because it drives him crazy. The hubris thing, really, though, is at the center Odysseus. Because throughout the book, he's shown to have multiple scenes with this pride, and how it's basically the sick cause of a lot of his problems, and eventually he does learn to swallow it, so that's good. Another big theme in this story is temptation. A lot of his men face temptation, he himself faces temptation, and a lot do fall into temptation. Such as the island of lotusts, which was one of the first locations they find. It's this island that is full of lotusts and has a population of 3 people. No one understands why. Basically, if you eat the lotus there, you don't want to leave. He tells the men, don't do it. Some of them do it, and he has to drag them by their feet and yank them back in the boat. That's just a simple example of the kind of temptation. Not only that, the scenes with the sirens, like as previously mentioned with Odysseus, such as tying himself up and thinking he could listen to it, and he is tempted by the music to jump into the water and die. Because sirens do that. He was tempted by many queens to stay with them, but his loyalty, which is the next theme I'm going to get into, held him back. But before I move on to that, there's a few more things of temptation I'd like to talk about. Such as the windbag from the King Aeolus. And here's a nice quote to go with that. Heaps of lovely plunder he hauls from Troy, while we who went through sludging just as hard, we go home empty-handed. Now this Aeolus loads him down with treasure, favoritism, friend to friend. Hurry, let's see what's loot into the sack. How much gold, silver, break it open now. And then the windbag busts open as they're inches away from Ithaca, and it blows them back into the ocean. Foolishly, back into the ocean. No more, straight up back, whole 9 yards. Restarted, and in a completely different location. And eventually they bump into these golden cattle on a certain island that was previously mentioned in the Hades location. Don't kill them, because if you kill them, you'll all die. Except Odysseus for some reason. That's a curse, and the men are tempted, and they do it. And guess what happens? The ship explodes, and they all die. Like, no more. They all die except Odysseus, who gets away on a piece of raft. And that's the problem when you don't have enough loyalty. And here's the big kicker. Loyalty. The true meat and gravy of the story has a lot of evidence here. We can really see the two ends of the spectrum of loyalty with the beggars at Odysseus' home and Odysseus himself. Odysseus is quite loyal to his home, and he is tempted multiple times by the goddesses and the witches to stay with them and to stay in these places forever. He could have simply left his family, but, and I quote, "True enough, Calypso, the lustrous goddess, tried to hold me back. Deep in her aching caviars, craving me for a husband. So did Circe, holding me just as warmly in her halls. The bewitching queen of Aeia, keen to have me too. But they never won the heart inside me. Never. So nothing as sweet as a man's own country, his own parents, even though he settled down in some luxurious house, off in a foreign land far from those who bore him." 35, Book 9. Then we can have our reflection of the beggars. Good example of these unloyal beggars is 170 of Book 1. "Then the suitors came in and took their places on the benches and seats. Forthwith men servants poured water over their hands. Maids went round with bread baskets. Pages filled with mixing bowls with wine and water. They had laid their hands upon the good things that were there before them. As soon as they had enough to eat and drink, they wanted music and dancing, which are the crowd embellishments of a banquet. So a servant brought lyre to Priamus, whom they compelled performance to sing to them. These people who are beginning to take all of the food and ruin Odysseus' beautiful castle are there nothing more than to beg his wife to marry them. As soon as they thought he was not coming back, they go over to his wife and beg her to marry them. Even during the challenge of stringing his bow, they shouted down at Odysseus, who was disguised as an old man with nothing. They yelled at him, saying he didn't know what to do. He was a fool, and more specifically, on page 436, "You grubby swineherd, are you crazy? The speedy dogs you reeled will eat your corpse. Out there with your pigs, out in the cold alone." And then, when Odysseus reveals himself, they all beg to him and kiss his feet. No, he kills them all because they were unloyal. Unloyal pigs, to be more specific. This book really keens on its themes because of these ideologies: pride, loyalty, temptation. And this is really where the author's purpose is. There's a big thing of swallowing your pride and loyalty being your key. Perseverance, destiny fulfilling. And I believe that author's purpose was very successful. As when you read through the book, you really see Odysseus change his view of all this pride that he's had, swallows it so that he can get home to his loved one, who are kind of suffering at the moment because of the nasties who want everything he owns for themselves. There's two great sides of presenting loyalty. Clear division between unloyal and loyal, especially with Odysseus being quite loyal to his family and doing anything he could to get home, versus the beggars who do not give a shit about anything but themselves, and do not care about the king that cared, and do not care for the king that cared so much for them. It's a beautiful way of telling story.
The end!